Our gospel lesson for this morning is Luke 18, 9 through 14. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. This is the word of the Lord. If you were to examine your prayers, say you write them all down or you record them or have some way to take a step back and look at them, would your prayers be more like the prayer of the Pharisee, or would your prayers be more like the prayer of the tax collector? Now, in Jesus' parable, both characters are pretty extreme, aren't they? Probably most of us do not consciously have contempt for other people, and we don't see ourselves as really arrogant and self-righteous, do we? On the other hand, we don't every day or every week have some major guilt or some crisis that makes us have an extreme kind of prayer. You know, oh God, have mercy on me, I'm a sinner. In fact, some of us may be somewhere between these two extremes, kind of in the middle. We know that we need God's mercy, yet we're trying to live a good life. So we're sort of like the Pharisee, trying to live a good life, but we're also sort of like the tax collector, knowing that we need God's mercy. Now, there are lots of directions to go in dealing with this. And one of them is a very theological and biblical direction. And it gets all the way to the basic, fundamental human nature of the human race being inevitably caught up in sinfulness. And knowing that we cannot earn our way into heaven by our good behavior. And knowing that God's mercy is freely given, and all we need to do is, as Paul Tillich said, accept that we are accepted. But there's one thing that hardly any of the commentaries or anybody really mentioned. What is it about God's mercy that is so important? Does God's mercy really make a difference? Would our prayers reflect a really important relationship with God in that respect? And maybe they don't. I don't know. So, I got to thinking this morning about God's mercy and why we should take it so seriously. want to tell you this little story to talk about God's transforming mercy. It's about a little village in France in the early 1950s. And it's just a charming little place. And the countryside all around is beautiful, and there's a nice river flowing near. And in this village is a big old Roman Catholic church, and the village is Catholic. And the mayor of this little town is the prototypical example of the Pharisee. He is so good. He has such high moral principles. And he does everything just right. In fact, he is so good that he has this poor little priest who's brand new give him a copy of his sermon every week before Sunday so that the mayor can correct it or add to it or revise it in some way. So here's the poor little priest up there preaching his sermon, and the mayor is hearing his own words, and he's smiling and going, "That's right. Yeah. I mean, boy, he's a good guy." Thing is, he has everybody under his thumb. Everybody's kind of afraid of him. Well, one day, a woman and her daughter come to town. And they rent a shop with an apartment overhead. And they're going to open a store. And so they get to work cleaning it up and fixing it up. And finally they're ready to open. And this woman happens to be a very gifted person at making chocolate. And so her store is full of all these beautiful little kinds of chocolate. And there's a whole bunch of them in the window of the store. Now, people pass by and they see it, but they won't come in. She invites people in, but they won't come in. It turns out that it's Lent. And the mayor has made sure that everybody does all that self-sacrifice in Lent. So this chocolate is kind of a threat to the religious practice. So she right away meets the mayor, and lo and behold, they become enemies. Well, finally, she meets this other woman who has great needs. She's kind of wacky, but she tastes some of the chocolate, and another woman tastes some of the chocolate, and so they start forming a little bit of a community. And this woman, it turns out, this little bit of a wacky woman, she had a real problem. Her husband was an alcoholic, and he beat her and was very mean to her. She couldn't stand it anymore. And so you know what happened? This new woman who owned this store, she gave this other woman sanctuary. And this other woman then started coming into her own and gaining her own mind, and she gained strength to not stay with her husband, but to escape his beating. This woman started being transformed. Nonetheless, that mayor, boy, he said, "You're going to be out of business by Easter." But doggone it, people, they would taste her chocolate, and it was just the best they had ever had in their life. And they finally people are coming, the shop is thriving. And then one day, this band of gypsies come down the river, and they're going to camp there for a while. And of course, the mayor and all the good people got to get them out, because they're trash. They're no good. like the Pharisee, you know. But the woman strikes up a relationship, and they too become part of the community, and they too become more accepted. Something is happening in this town. This woman's chocolate is just amazing. And then it's getting close to Easter. The mayor, this good Pharisee person, he starts going a little bonkers. You see, he's got a big secret. His wife, he has told everyone, is on extended vacation. But in reality, she has left, and she is never coming back. And it's really, really, really hurting him deeply. And so finally he's just distraught, and he takes one of her dresses out of the closet and just starts cutting it up. And by golly, and then he just sort of snaps, and he grabs something like a hammer or something, and runs over to that chocolate store, and it's closed and nobody's there, and he breaks in, and he's just gonna chop up the place. He's out of control. But right away, you know what he does? He accidentally gets some chocolate on his lips. That's really good. And he's been denying himself all these weeks of Lent, and he's hardly eaten. And what he does eat is just very, very mundane. He's really hungry, and he's so needy, and he's in such pain. He starts eating the chocolate. He's gorging on the chocolate. Oh, it's so satisfying. The morning comes, and there he is, sound asleep, lying in the window with chocolate all over him. It so happens that it's Easter morning, and the priest comes by and sees him and wakes him up, and then the woman comes, and they help him get ready for church. And so the priest hands him the sermon, and he hands it back. See, when the mayor could no longer hide that big secret, and he was really starting to be found out anyway. She was gone for a long time. And his cover was blown. He went from being the Pharisee to having the prayer of the tax collector. When he could let out his pain, let out his suffering, let out his need, then his prayer was like that tax collector's prayer. Oh God, have mercy on me, I'm a sinner. See, he had tried and tried and tried and tried to be so good. He was trying to be good so much that he could, in a sense, buy his way into heaven, or earn his way into heaven. And he couldn't, because life is just too big for an individual. And so he finally put himself in right relation with God. It was only God who could offer whatever that is, that grace, that mercy, that could give him relief, and that could restore his life, and that could make him a different person. He smiled that morning for the first time in months, probably. He was a changed man, not because he got better and better and better, but because he had a different understanding, a different relationship with God. Now, he knew who he was. And he knew that he needed help. And God surprised him. God's mercy, therefore, and the reason I told this story, is that God's mercy is like that chocolate and that woman who come in, and interaction with them just has these great effects on people's lives, and people have such great need. And they're just living with it and living with it until they can't take it anymore. So that's why God's mercy is so important in this parable of Jesus. It's that chocolate that just transforms. That woman's presence who just transforms. And so we can talk about the doctrine all the way back to the doctrine of original sin and how we all need to stand in that right relationship to God. But what we really need to know is that mercy and that grace and that love and that forgiveness are so important because they are so healing and transforming, and because we don't have to hide who we are and what we do anymore. So we do give thanks to God that God's mercy is freely given, not earned. And so in our prayers, yes, we try to live a good life. We try to live a good life from the stance of that tax collector who has been forgiven and healed. We live a good life not in order to earn our way into heaven, but out of gratitude for the free gift of God's grace. And so we in the church this day and every day bear witness to God's wonderful mercy, because we know that it doesn't do any good to be that Pharisee. And we encounter people all the time. Strangers, family members, and sometimes our own selves. We know that they too, as well as us, need some of that chocolate, need that new relationship, need that free gift of God's mercy. And they don't have to hide anymore, and they don't have to bear it all alone anymore. So let us this day, let our prayer be a prayer of thanks, and be a prayer of acceptance of God's wonderful gift for us. Because our world, from the Middle East right here to Rochester, is so filled with such need and pain and suffering and sorrow that we can do no better than to stand before God with that tax collector. Have mercy on me, O God, for I am a sinner. Amen.